guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna be watching a story about a girl who followed her crush to the basement. And let's see what happened.
I was running through the rain trying to get home as quickly as possible when I noticed my crush James walking onto the school grounds.
Why?
I didn't want him to see me like this. I was soaked to the bone,
Understandable.
looking like a drowned rat. But I had to know what he was up to. What if he was breaking into the school? I decided to follow him. And at one point, I swear, he turned around and looked right at me. I didn't know if I was seeing things, but it even looked like he smiled at me. Wait, did he want me to follow him? Suddenly, I felt brave. I was going to tell him how I felt. The moment I'd waited for my whole life had arrived. But then I saw him climbing into the tornado shelter, and that should have been my first warning not to keep following him, because things were about to get super weird.
The strange hole in the ground.
My crazy story
I mean, I would not like to go into that hole on her place. But she is in love. We have to understand.
Climbing into a tornado shelter after my crush, with absolutely no plan of what I'd do next. I was acting purely on impulse, and it felt amazing. I felt sure he knew I'd climbed in after him, but I couldn't see anything, so I used the flashlight on my phone and realized he'd already gone down the stairs. The rain was really pouring now, so I closed the lid. The last thing I wanted was to flood the shelter.
To open it
Not on a
after.
special night like tonight. I'd never been this close to James before. Just the two of us
been
alone.
dreaming about
Except
kissing
we
him.
weren't alone. As soon as I closed the lid, I heard a girl's voice. No! I started panicking and decided this had been a stupid idea. I pushed the lid to climb
There
back
is a
out,
girl.
but it wouldn't
Oh,
open.
no.
No matter how hard
have
I
a
pushed it,
girlfriend.
it didn't budge. Oh my
And she
gosh,
can't
I was
open
stuck.
the door?
If it had just been me and James down there, it would have been quite exciting. But suddenly I heard a kissing sound and I realized my worst nightmare had just come true. I was stuck in a tornado shelter with my crush and his
Oh
girlfriend
my
by the
God.
sounds of things. I didn't want them to know I was there, like some creepy stalkers, so I tried to keep
That's
as quiet
correct.
as possible. I could hear them laughing, and then the
Such
girl
an
said,
awkward
"Did anyone see
situation."
you come in here? I hope we didn't get caught." And James replied, "No, I don't think so. Oh no, wait, there was a girl from my school, but she wouldn't say anything. She's such a loser." At that, I had to cover my face. I wanted to cry. It felt like he'd shoved a knife through my heart. And then I felt angry. I had to get out of there. This was literally the most embarrassing situation
how to get
ever be in.
out?
And what would my parents think when they found out? I gave the lid one final push, but I pushed too hard. The next moment, I lost my footing and was rolling down the stairs. I landed with a thump and blacked out for a second. When I opened my eyes, James and his girlfriend were standing over me. They didn't even ask me if I was okay. James just looked down at me and said, "Did you follow me here? What are you playing at?" Then he turned to his girlfriend and said, "Come on, babe, let's bounce." Then they just left me lying there and headed up the stairs. I was about to tell them that we were trapped down there, but they'd soon discover it for themselves. I could hear James bashing on the lid of the shelter, but obviously it
He will
wouldn't
kill
open.
her now.
And then he shouted down to me and asked if I'd done this and if I thought it was funny. No, James, I did not find this funny. I wanted to shout up at him. Gosh, what would he say if he knew how much I wished I were his girlfriend and not that dumb blonde girl?
you have a
Then he
girl
started
now,
shouting
just
about
calm
how
down.
he had to get out ASAP because the next day was his big football game that was going to guarantee him a scholarship to a top college. He said he had to get it, otherwise he'd be stuck in this stupid town forever. Oh no. This was a disaster,
like to
and
be
it was
in her
only
place
just the
now.
beginning.
Oh my
I
God.
sat up and looked around with my flashlight on my phone and realized there was literally nothing down there except for some sandbags
Oh, they're
and an
gonna
old
die
scratchy
there.
blanket that looked like 1,000 bugs might be
Oh.
living in it. And then I realized I was shivering, like properly freezing cold.
can't
My
call
phone
anyone?
was on 10%. Not that it mattered. There was absolutely
Oh,
no
no
signal down there
signal.
anyway. I didn't even have a bottle of water on me, and by the looks of things, James and his girlfriend had nothing either. Oh man. I held my breath as
They
they
have
came
to
down the
scream.
stairs. I was so scared of what
And
they'd
beat
say
the
to
door or
me. They were
something.
arguing, and James's girlfriend came right up to me and said, "This is all your
Ugh.
fault. You've ruined everything."
Sure, they
Truly,
are
that
really
felt like the
angry at
most
her.
awkward moment of my entire life. James told her to try and calm down, and I learned her name was Amy. She must have gone to another school because I'd never seen her before. Neither of them had signal either, and soon they started screaming for help. I didn't want to tell them it was pointless. The rain was so loud, no one would
Oh,
hear
they
us
have to
even
wait
if they were right
until the
above
next
us.
day?
Eventually, I told them I was sorry, even though it wasn't my fault. I lied and told them I'd been trying to shelter from the rain because I'd forgotten my
Well,
umbrella.
it's a
but
partially
Amy
true.
didn't buy it. She said, "Yeah, right. You're clearly a stalker. Do you get kicks out of watching other people making out or something?" James said you're a loser, and he wasn't joking. Look at you. If I hadn't already been underground, I'd have asked the ground to swallow me up. No one had ever been so mean to me before.
she's really
After
mean
that, it
girlfriend.
was really uncomfortable, and all of us were in a bad mood. Soon, it became obvious we'd all have to spend the night down there. So I found a corner as far away from Amy as possible and lay down. I was still shivering
Oh, it
and
should
thought
be
about
cold
using the
there.
insect-infested blanket, but
Hopefully the
Amy had
next
already
day they can
grabbed
get
it.
out.
There was no way I'd fall asleep. I was so thirsty, and even though the shelter luckily had a small toilet, there was no sink, which meant no running water. I'd have drunk the rain earlier if I knew this was going to happen. I covered my ears because I was afraid I'd hear them kissing, and eventually I must have fallen asleep because the next moment I found myself waking up to hearing a rustling sound. I looked over at Amy, and even though I couldn't see
She's a
anything,
demon.
I knew she was eating something. I could hear her. I couldn't believe she had food with her
Oh,
and
no.
wasn't sharing it. Did James know? I should have said something, but I was too scared. I'd already caused enough trouble. Finally, morning came, and by then my phone was at 2%. Soon I wouldn't even know what time
Why
it
she
was.
didn't switch
I
it
was
off for the
bursting for the
night?
toilet, so I went to use it, and of course, Amy shouted at me and said my peeing was too loud and had woken her up. Then I noticed there was a light switch outside the toilet. I clicked on it, not expecting it to work, and suddenly the whole shelter was flooded with
Wow.
light. Amy quickly
There is
pulled the
a
blanket
light.
and told
It's
me to
good.
look away. Oh my gosh, were they not wearing clothes? Then Amy just laughed and said everyone knows that body heat is the best way to survive in cold weather. Ew! Once they got dressed, I realized how pretty Amy was, and it really annoyed
She
me.
got
How could
really
I have
jealous
thought
now.
James would ever be interested in someone like me when he had Amy? I ran up the stairs and tried to push the lid again,
What
but then
a
I just sat
disaster.
there waiting for
Oh,
people to
poor
arrive at
girl.
school. Then I'd scream my head off. Plus, I didn't want them to look at me. I felt so insecure about my running clothes, and I hadn't even shaved my legs. I didn't
How
want
is that
James
important?
noticing.
Your
I could hear the
legs,
school
come
bell
on.
and feet walking over us, but no one heard me scream.
What,
How long
even
would
in
we
the
be down
morning?
here? James was complaining about being hungry,
But
and
it's
Amy
insane,
too.
they're gonna
but I
die
knew Amy
there.
had eaten something in the night. She was a liar. We started looking around the place to see if we could find anything, and James suddenly sounded happy. Under the sandbags, he'd found some old bottles of water. The water looked disgusting, but I'd have drunk anything by that point. Both James and I downed like a liter each, but Amy refused. Suit yourself, I thought. Then about an hour later, I started getting a weird pain in my stomach. Oh no. There was no toilet paper. This couldn't be happening. I had to run
What
and
a
almost puked my guts up.
disaster
And I
story.
wasn't the only one. James raced in after me, and at one point, we were both lying on the floor
Oh, they
taking
get
it in
close.
turns to
Her
vomit.
dream
Not
came
exactly
true.
what I had in mind for our first date together. That water must have been 20 years old or something. Amy got seriously annoyed and even tried to drag James out of the bathroom. Was she jealous? And then I noticed an empty soda bottle behind the toilet. Had Amy secretly had a bottle of soda and not told us? How selfish. That first day
Yeah,
seemed
sure,
to
she
fly
will drink
by.
it
Most of it spent in the
by
bathroom,
herself
of course. By the end of the
to
day,
survive.
I almost lost my voice from screaming for help. Would we be stuck down there forever? And then nighttime came, and James and Amy got into a huge fight. Secretly, it made me happy to see them argue. James deserved better. He was super upset that he'd missed his football game, but Amy just kept saying he could go to college with her and then they'd never be apart. And James got really angry and said he didn't want to go to her college. Then the whole
But they're
room
gonna
went
die there,
silent.
not to go to
It
the
was
college.
tense. I didn't know what
They
to
don't
do,
know how
so
to
I
get
just
away from
stayed
there.
quiet and pretended to be asleep. A while later, I heard someone saying my name. I opened my eyes and could see James. He said he could hear my teeth chattering and that I should come and share their
how
blanket.
sweet
But if
from
Amy
you.
woke up and saw me, she'd go mental. I didn't care about her though. James was actually being kind of nice to me for the first time in my life. I couldn't lose my chance. So I climbed under the blanket next to him. Our legs were almost touching. And of course, that woke Amy up. And when she saw me, I thought she was going to
Oh my
explode.
God.
James wanted to keep the peace, so he snuggled into her and left me lying there all alone. But I couldn't stop thinking about the moment we just
She's
shared.
creepy.
And during the night, I decided to try and get closer to him. I rolled over until I was almost right at his back. But then I heard something. They were kissing. I was watching them, wishing it was me he was kissing. I couldn't stop staring, but suddenly, Amy opened her eyes and caught me watching them. She told James, but James said I was asleep
whatever,
and
at
that they
this
should
point,
get some
you don't
sleep
care
too.
anymore, right?
But
You're
James
gonna
didn't
die,
go back
so you're
to
just
sleep.
gonna
He waited
watch
until
or
Amy
do
was snoring
whatever.
next to him, and then he reached out his hand
Oh,
and
no
grabbed
way,
mine.
no way, he's trying
I
to
felt
get
like my
two
heart was going
girlfriends?
to explode, and I so badly wanted to get closer to him, but it was too risky. There was always the next night,
It's insane.
right? So we fell asleep holding hands.
He's
and
kissing
I
a
couldn't
girl and she
stop
wants to
smiling.
kiss him
In the
anyway
morning,
and
though,
hold
I
his
was
hand.
lying there all alone. When Amy got up to go to the bathroom, I smiled at James and he smiled back. But then Amy came out and saw me and said, "Freak, stop staring at us like that." I thought James would stick up for me, but he didn't. He was acting like nothing had happened between us. The rest of that day was kind of weird. We just sat around quietly.
I wouldn't
At
like to
one
have a
point,
boyfriend
James
like
almost
this.
fainted. I mean, we were all
She should
starving.
forget him
I was so
forever.
weak. I just kept napping, and when I woke up from one of my naps, James and Amy were eating biscuits. Where did they get them from? I could almost feel the saliva pouring out of
What?
my mouth, and I assumed Amy would offer me one, but she didn't. They ate them all, and after that, I didn't speak to either of them. I was so mad. I couldn't sleep that night because my stomach was rumbling so
It's
loudly.
already second
But
day
once
or
Amy
what?
had fallen
It's
asleep,
insane.
James reached into his pocket and handed me a biscuit. I swear I almost kissed him right there and then. This was why I had a crush on him. He was actually a good guy, even if he had a demon for a girlfriend. For the next few nights, we got into a bit of a routine.
A
After
bit of
Amy
a
fell
routine,
asleep,
no
we'd
food,
lie
no
there and
drink.
hold
What?
hands. And one night, James came right up to me, and I could tell he was about to kiss me. But Amy started murmuring in her sleep, and he quickly moved over to her and held her. It drove me crazy. After we'd been down there for like 6 days,
6
things were
days?
really
How
starting
they
to
could
smell.
survive?
The toilet, my clothes, it
For
was
6
nasty.
days, no food,
and
no
still,
drink.
James and I hadn't shared a kiss. But for some
don't want to
reason,
kiss
Amy
him
still
still.
looked good. That day I noticed she didn't get up. It was like she'd given up on shouting for help, but it bothered me. Why should she get to sit there and chill? So I told her I'd just seen a huge spider, and I've never seen her run so fast. She raced up the stairs to where James was, and I immediately went over to where she'd been sitting. I just had this feeling she was hiding something, like another pack of biscuits. But I found something much bigger. Under where she'd been sitting was a loose part of the floorboard.
What?
I lifted it up and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was so much stuff down there. Beauty products, food, a battery pack, even clothes. Oh my gosh,
What it
what
was?
was going on?
But-
I didn't have time to put the floorboard back
Then they
before
have a
James
key?
appeared to find the
A
spider.
girlfriend have a
I
key?
whispered that Amy had been hiding stuff. James came running over and pulled out her phone. He knew her password and typed it in quickly. Then he saw some messages that said things like, "I need to find a way to stop him going off to college. I'm scared he'll leave
No
me."
way.
As he was reading them and I was eating one of her
That
secret
girl
chocolate
dragged
bars,
him into
she
this
came down
hole.
the stairs. "What are you doing?" she
No
screamed.
way.
But it was too late. We'd caught her red-handed. She tried to grab her phone back
She
from
was
James,
ready
but
to
he
leave
wouldn't give it to her.
there.
Eventually, she broke down and said that she didn't want James to leave her for college, so she'd planned this. But she had only meant for them
Devious.
to be stuck down there for 1 or 2 days. Then she said I'd ruined it all by turning up and getting them locked in here. But there was something else. While she'd been talking, I'd been digging around, and inside a pair of her socks was a
Yeah,
key. I
yeah,
held it in
see
my
that.
hands and watched as James went crazy at Amy. He said he couldn't
They're gonna
believe
kill
he
her
dated
now.
such a psycho and that she'd
This is
officially
mad.
ruined his life. Then the best part of all, he turned to me and apologized. He said he was sorry he'd treated me so badly, but actually he'd realized how amazing I was and had enjoyed our sneaky hand-holding
I don't know
sessions while
about
Amy
that guy.
slept. At that, Amy went
He's a bit
berserk.
weird, I must
She ran
admit.
towards me and I quickly jumped away. Then I watched as she dug around inside her secret hiding place. Looking for this? I asked, swinging the key in my hand. Then I turned to James and said, she's been hiding this key the whole time. Before Amy could get to it, I ran up the stairs and undid the lock. James was right behind me and we both climbed out and collapsed
Wow,
onto the
the
ground
freedom.
laughing. We were free! As Amy climbed out, I thought she was going to kick me or something, but she just stormed off.
Yeah.
And James shouted after her, that's right,
Will
keep
they
walking.
kiss now
I never
after
wanna
all
see
they
your
went
face
through?
again. Finally, she was gone, and James turned to me and gave me the biggest kiss
Oh,
ever.
wow,
We
how
could see the janitor
romantic.
running towards us. And before all hell broke loose with our parents about where we'd been for the past week, James asked for my number. And now we're about to go on our first proper date. The worst week of my life.
It's
just
really crazy.
became the
I just don't know how they survived there. But that's it. And I hope guys you enjoyed my reaction video today. Please like and subscribe and see you in my next video. Bye.